Hello and welcome to the Time on Screen podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I'm the managing editor at Worn and Wound. Time on Screen is a podcast where we talk about movies and watches and time and where all of those things intersect. Today, I'm really happy to be joined by Kyle Snar, Worn and Wound's head of partnerships. And you know, if Kyle's on the podcast, there's a good chance we're talking about a Wes Anderson movie. And we are talking about Grand Budapest Hotel today. Kyle, how's it going?
It is great. I'm so excited to talk about this movie. And thanks for having me on and keeping the tradition alive here.
Of course, there were a lot of things that kind of like lined up that, made us think now's the time to do a Wes Anderson movie. There's a new Wes Anderson movie in theaters. There was a watch release a few months ago that sort of inspired the idea behind this podcast in general. And Wes himself has a watch adjacent product that he's currently all over the social medias selling. So at least it's found its way to my algorithm pretty regularly. I don't know about yours, but
nice. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of good things coming together, and I think this is a great time to talk about one of his big movies, man.
Yeah, for sure. Before we do that, we always do a wrist check on these podcasts. Kyle, what are you wearing today?
Well, to keep the tradition alive from one of our very early podcasts we did of Time on Screen, we did, of course, The Life Aquatic. And so I decided to pull out my Vostok kind of scuba dude watch that is featured pretty prominently in The Life Aquatic. And it's one I love to wear from time to time, but I thought it was appropriate for today's discussion. Totally
appropriate. There's only one watch that I think would be more appropriate, and we don't have access to it because we don't have the job necessary to acquire that watch, which we'll talk about momentarily.
What are you wearing, Zach?
I'm wearing my Archinaut Arc 2 Fordite, which is just a great summer watch. It's on a sporty white rubber strap, super colorful dial. It's the warm weather's here in New England, so trying to embrace it as much as I can, even though I think I prefer to just kind of like sit in the air conditioning most of the summer. But that's just how it goes.
That's a cool watch. I remember when you got that, I think at San Francisco wind up maybe a couple of years ago.
I did, yeah, San Francisco 2 years ago. I'm kind of like working. I'm sort of like getting to it like on and off, as I can, but I want to write like a sort of like a 2-year retrospective of like my time with this watch. And I've also picked up another Archinaut in that time. Just a really cool brand that I've gotten pretty attached to over the last few years. So
yeah, Rob's a good guy. He's a pleasure to talk with, for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay. Grand Budapest Hotel. Grand Budapest Hotel was released in March 2014. Obviously written and directed by Wes Anderson. As with all of his movies, it has a very large ensemble cast, including Ray Fiennes in one of the key roles in his career, which I think we'll talk about in more depth soon. Tony Revolori, and I think his first role in a feature film.
Yeah.
Saoirse Ronan, Willem Dafoe, Tilda Swinton, wearing a ton of makeup, almost unrecognizable. Jeff Goldblum, Edward Norton, and many more, including some walk-on performances from Wes Anderson regulars. This movie has a huge cast. Is this where like the huge Wes Anderson cast kind of became a thing?
I mean, he had definitely big ensembles with, Royal Tenenbaum. It was definitely thought of as an ensemble cast, and then he had a pretty big ensemble cast for The Life Aquatic. But this is where it became, I think, the cool thing to do to get in on a Wes Anderson movie. This is where that kind of idea of Hollywood elites kind of being like, oh man, here's my chance to get in on a Wes vehicle.
Yeah, this one has a mix of people kind of like joining him for the first time, and also people who have like done a couple of or more movies with him. So it's like, to me, this sort of feels like the start of like the big troupe of actors that will sort of like follow him until certainly at this point in his career, and presumably as the years go on. I always like to start these conversations, Kyle, by asking about the first time you saw the movie in question. I know you have a particularly good story around seeing this movie for the first and second time.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about that and how this movie made an impression on you from the start.
Yeah, certainly. So like, I think I've gone on record on this before, but like, even though I'm like kind of, I guess, our resident like Wes Anderson super fan, whenever I see his movies for the first time, and I saw this opening weekend at a packed theater in Salt Lake City, and I was like, it's fine. Like but I instantly knew, as second the lights went up, I need to see it again. Like, I just knew that instantly. And of course, the great thing about Wes Anderson movies is that they reward and reward and reward upon rewatch. So it's really, for me, it was the second time I saw this movie where I actually clicked into it and like, okay, there's something special going on. And it was months later. In that amount of time, I had moved from Salt Lake City to just outside New York City, and the local kind of movie theater / art house cinema in our neighborhood was doing a Q&A with the film critic Matt Zoller Seitz.
Mm-hmm.
And he had written a huge book. I'm holding it up in the screen here for all you listeners to show Zach, but he'd written a book that was basically like the compendium of the Grand Budapest Hotel, I guess a report of how it all came together. And he signed it for me too, which was really exciting. When I asked him, when he was signing it, he asked me, what's my favorite Wes Anderson movie? And I said, it is The Life Aquatic. So he wrote a quote in here to Kyle, God damn it, I'm sick of these dolphins.
That's
and
pretty good.
So, that night was a special night for me. I think Matt Zoller Seitz is one of the head editors over at, now it just escaped me. Isn't it RogerEbert.com?
Yes, I believe he's been with RogerEbert.com for quite some time. I think like right after Roger Ebert passed, I think he might have like taken over the reins there. But
so it was just really cool he's been on set for multiple Wes Anderson productions and really kind of is the writer who's documenting his life in a lot of ways. So that was a really cool night, but also really I fell in love with the movie in a deep way on that second viewing.
Yeah, I have a somewhat similar kind of like track record with this movie. I didn't see it in a Q&A setting with Matt. That would have been very cool. I'm very jealous of that. But I saw it, opening weekend. I'm pretty sure I saw it at the little indie theater here in Concord opening weekend. They actually have a long tradition of like always getting like the new Wes Anderson movie and playing it opening weekend. And like I feel like I've seen many cool. Wes Anderson movies there. On like opening night or opening weekend. Anyway, similarly to you, I saw it and liked it, but it didn't register with me that it was like a major work on that first viewing. And then I saw it, maybe like a month or so later, and I definitely liked it more the second time around. And by that time, the movie kind of had some like momentum. This was a big hit. This was like by far the biggest like commercial success of Wes Anderson's career to that point. Maybe still is. I haven't. Like,
I think it is numbers, by like a long shot, to be honest. Yeah.
And like it had kind of become a phenomenon, and there was just like a lot of conversation about it. And that sometimes that sort of like recontextualizes a movie for you when you have a chance to see it again. And I just sort of I caught some details that I didn't catch the first time, and it just sort of worked for me a little bit better that second time. And it sort of started to become clear to me at that point that like this is sort of a like a career defining moment for him, starting to get that Oscar buzz, and it was nominated for many Oscars, and was just a huge both commercial and critical success for Wes Anderson in a way that he hadn't really experienced up to that point. I mean, critics certainly liked Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums, but this one kind of was celebrated as like his like real arrival, in a way that those movies that he made when he was much younger weren't. A more mature work, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, it also is the movie that kind of started to define the real look and feel of the rest of his career too. I mean, he kind of unapologetically just started doing exactly what he wanted to do at that point, and I think it's like really clear that he is in a position now in his career where he can just do what he wants and doesn't have to feel incumbent upon what the studio thinks or what the critics think or even what the audience thinks. He just knows his crowd. He knows who's going to like it. He if other people don't like it, doesn't seem to really affect him that much.
Yeah, I mean, I put in the outline here. We can get to it later, but I see this movie as sort of like a dividing line between like the early part of his career and the part of his career where we're at now, where he really is sort of functioning as his own company, both literally and figuratively, making exactly the kinds of movies he wants with the people he wants and feels comfortable with, and he really has sort of like carte blanche to do, whatever he pleases at this point. And I think that for better or worse, and certainly I think good good critics and writers, who people who know movies might say that it's like for the worse that he's sort of like it does sort of almost like the same thing stylistically, time and time again. This is sort of like where that starts, I think, in a lot of ways. It's interesting to think about this movie sort of like as like a midpoint in his career. I think the more I think about like his filmography, the more I think like Grand Budapest really is kind of a dividing line in every sense of the word.
Agreed.
From like that early part to the latter.
Yeah.
Part.
Yep. Totally.
So we're talking about Grand Budapest Hotel today for a handful of reasons. It really kind of started with the release of a very unusual watch from Maurice de Mauriac, which is a tribute to the Society of the Crossed Keys, which is just a plot element from the Grand Budapest Hotel, and it turns out a real thing.
Shockingly,
a real organization of hotel concierges. And I remember, Kyle, I got the press release for this, and I thought, oh, this is like a very strange watch. And we wrote about it. Our colleague Brett Braley wrote about it for the website. And I remember I posted this in our Slack channel, like the finished article, and I said, like, there's something in the Slack channel that you'll want to see. Tell me about your like initial reaction to seeing this highly unusual Maurice de Mauriac.
Yeah, well, first things first, as you mentioned, like, who would have thunk that this thing called the Society of the Crossed Keys, which so clearly seems to be pulled right from Wes Anderson's brain and how he sees the world, is literally a thing that exists in the real world, and he just, I think, stumbled upon it and then incorporated it in, but it feels so accidentally Wes Anderson. It's not even funny, hence why I wore my AWA cap today. Right. It's kind of hysterical, and it didn't shock me too much that Maurice de Mauriac was the brand to do this project, only because I felt like one of their previous watches, the Rally Master, which is kind of a tennis themed watch, created by helped designed by one of our friends, Carlton de Woody, is very Wes Anderson-y in its like look and feel, its color schemes. I mean, it really looks like Richie Tenenbaum could easily be wearing the Maurice de Mauriac Rally Master. So it seemed to fit from like the brand that brought it to us, but I had no idea this was an actual society.
Yeah, it's just so strange. And you can only purchase this watch if you're in this, professional organization, which I think is kind of charming. And also I imagine must be frustrating for some Wes Anderson fans who would love to have a watch with that like crossed keys emblem on the dial, and it's right there.
I have a sense they'll find a way to get it.
I mean, I would imagine like these things always have a way of sort of like leaking out, to like the true collectors, the true enthusiasts. But I thought that was just like such a strange thing. So like that was sort of like the genesis for discussing this this podcast. And then there's another product that recently sort of unveiled, and that's a Mont Blanc pen that Wes Anderson helped to design. We'll link to an article in Gear Patrol about this pen, but it's the Wes Anderson Schreiberling limited edition EDC pen set. This is a fun pen. I don't know. Have you had a chance to look at this?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think the colorway is like right on point. I love the packaging, of course, that comes with it. That feels very kind of things organized neatly, sort of like lay flat, kind of built into the little tin that it comes
Mhm.
with, and then of course the little like spot that comes with it feels very Wes Anderson-y as well.
Yeah, he's done a number of little kind of like commercials slash short films to to help support this project. He's always wearing a Mont Blanc watch. It looks like in those short films. We'll find links to those and put them in the show notes. What do you think of your your I think he's your favorite director. I think you've said that in the past. Well,
Yeah.
what do you think of him kind of like becoming a pitch man for Pens? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I love it. I think it's awesome. I mean, one of his first kind of things outside of movies was directing commercials, and he's a
That's true.
very very popular and cool commercial from I think it was an Amex early on that he did, like kind of a big long take with a lot of intricate stuff, and then he's done some cool stuff in the fashion world. Hey man, I'm in advertising and marketing. I'm always a
That's
fan
true.
of people who
Who am I talking to here? Yeah.
people who can take their skills and creatively bring something to life that's an object that we purchase. I'm all for it, man.
I think that our I mean I agree. Like I think it's a fun project, and it just kind of like occurs to me that the culture has really evolved on this. Like I can remember when one of my favorite artists, Bob Dylan, appeared in a Victoria's Secret commercial, and people went crazy, with like the charges of sellout, and
Yeah.
you can find similar instances of that of artists kind of like becoming spokespeople or for products or appearing in advertising where people have taken up arms against them and then given them that sellout moniker. But I think we've moved past that. I think there's an understanding that like that's just sort of you can maintain artistic integrity while also
while paying bills.
Exactly. You gotta do it.
I hope so, man. I hope so.
Yeah, I think so. I think we have. This is but yeah, this is a cool pen. I like the colors. Are you a fountain pen guy? Do you use a fountain pen?
I have multiple fountain pens here on my desk. Do you want me to start pulling them out and talking about them, or what? Are we good?
I mean, you don't have to. I also have a handful of fountain pens, on my desk. There is something kind of nice about, writing with a fountain pen.
It's charming.
Yeah. Yeah. And like they're, I appreciate them as like well-made objects in the same way that I appreciate, like a nice watch, like as a well-made object.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, we'll leave a link to the, like I said, Gear Patrol's story on the Wes Anderson fountain pen, and some links to those Instagram advertisements and other promotional materials he's made. Lastly, the other thing contributing to our conversation here is there is a new Wes Anderson movie in theaters, The Phoenician Scheme. I know that you had a chance to see this recently. I did as well. What are your this isn't a podcast on The Phoenician Scheme, but I think it's fair to get your thoughts on it, and I'd love to share mine too. What did you think of The Phoenician Scheme?
So, again, like I've only seen it once, so I'm anxious and excited for a secondary viewing. But like in my first viewing, I would say don't know if I was completely on board. For the first 10 minutes, I was like, I'm like, really a lot happens in the beginning of this movie, and I was very kind of like trying to keep up with it, and then I think something switched, and I realized that the tone of this particular Wes Anderson movie is a little bit different than some of his other live action movies, and it was far more, for me, similar in tone to his stop motion animation movies. So like Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs, once I kind of realized that this was a live action cartoon, essentially is what he was going for tonally with it, at that point, everything switched, and I absolutely loved it, and I was ready to rock and roll. So but before making that switch mentally, I was like kind of jury's out a little bit on this one with me.
Yeah. By live action cartoon, are you referring to like some of the cartoonish violence in the movie? Like
for sure there was cartoonish violence, but there's also just like the way the dialogue is given and how it all kind of functions. It feels very like not slapsticky, but maybe a little bit,
Yeah. I've also only had a chance to see it once. I will probably see it again once it starts streaming somewhere, which in this day and age could probably happen relatively soon. With the short theatrical windows. But I was less impressed by this movie. I wouldn't say it like let me down because my expectations honestly weren't super high for this one. Here's what I'll say. I thought that the Benicio del Toro performance is very good, and he like carries the movie in a way that's like not dissimilar from the way that Ray Fiennes carries Grand Budapest Hotel. Like they're both sort of like in almost every scene, and
Yeah.
like they're like the key performances in a movie with a large ensemble. So I think there's some parallels there. Um, you know, I think that like it's an unfair criticism of Wes Anderson to say that he's just like kind of like parodying himself, you know, with every new release. It's sort of like a lazy critique of a filmmaker who's like a true auteur and has like a really like defined style and point of view. But I kind of felt it with this one. Like it's sort of like to me, you know, felt like that diorama sort of like production design style taken to an extreme that just sort of like took me out of the movie a little bit.
Yeah,
And
I can see that.
yeah, and also part of this is I had rewatched the Darjeeling Limited relatively recently, maybe like 2 weeks or so before I saw the Phoenician Scheme, and it just struck me, you know, how much more I don't know, kind of like lifelike his early movies are. Like they feel, even though they're sort of like fantastical and highly stylized, they still feel to me like they take place in the real world. You know, like they're shot outside and they have, you know, on location often, as Grand Budapest was, and we'll talk about that. The Phoenician Scheme and some of his later work just feels like they're shot like in a picture box, you know, and
I
to
mean,
me that's
I
sort of
think
like
they're kind of like staged theatrical events more than
yeah.
anything at this point. But
Yeah.
I agree. I just think he's in a different mode right now.
Yeah, and like to me, you know, there's nothing wrong with like, you know, with liking that, and I think that, you know, there's a case to be made that like that style is like, you know, quite, you know, beautiful, and certainly it's challenging to pull that off. To me, it just sort of, I find that like it's hard for me to connect emotionally, you know, when the movie feels that claustrophobic.
I hear you, and again, like I the other thing that I really liked about the Phoenician Scheme is that even once I did click into the idea that this is kind of more of a stage cartoony sort of storytelling, and I'm not going to give anything away about the ending, but I was honestly very, very personally and emotionally touched at how the film ended, in the way, in the place, and the relationships, how they ended up. It was very emotionally like gratifying and satisfying to me. So I'm excited to watch it again. I'm sure you're going to watch it again. We should talk about it again once we watched it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that, because like honestly, like I would have loved to have gotten there, you know, with the Phoenician Scheme and with Asteroid City, you know, as well, which is a movie that a lot of people had like a very strong emotional reaction to, and I just like it. Just I felt very detached.
You're heartless,
you know,
Kazan.
I am
heartless.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm really, I'm just a podcasting machine. Basically, that's all. That's all this is. Just a bag of flesh made for podcasting.
I'll say just one last thing about the Phoenician Scheme. I loved that Michael Cera made his debut in Wes Anderson film, and I have a hot take about why we. Do you want me to go now? I think we should save it because it has a little bit to do with. I'll do my hot take at the end because it has a little bit to do with this rewatching Grand Budapest for this podcast. But I will say that Michael Cera strolled by the Warner Bros. Offices a couple of months ago. And so,
really?
Yeah. He was just walking outside our office, and I saw him, and he saw me, and I said, hey, and he said, hey back. And that was about that. But
did he come inside and buy a strap in the showroom? Or
seriously, he was on the phone. If he wasn't on the phone, I legit would have invited him to do so.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, maybe he lives in that neighborhood. Maybe he's around there more often than not, and we'll see him again. That's
maybe, but
maybe he listens to the podcast. Who knows? Like, that's
seriously,
that's wild. No, I had no idea.
All right, we'll save my hot take for the end of the podcast.
Okay, sounds good. We love a hot take to end a time on screen podcast. So just some like production notes around Grand Budapest Hotel. It was filmed in primarily in Gorlitz, Germany, in a converted department store, which they turned into the hotel. This is not a actual hotel. It's based on, you know, any number of you know, real hotels that kind of like exist in the Alps. Have you ever like seen a hotel like this in real life, Kyle? In your European travels, have you?
I've seen some German castles and some Swiss
Mhm.
chalets, but not like a grand hotel. No.
It like I've similarly like I've seen some some Swiss chalets that like kind of like remind me
Yeah.
of this hotel, these like smaller hotels or chalets that are like in the mountains, and maybe you need to take a funicular
Yeah. Yeah.
to access, that just kind of like it's just so strange. Like I can remember being in Zermatt with Norcane a few years ago, which is like in the Alps, and like you see these hotels and chalets just sort of like on the side of a mountain, and you wonder like how did like who stays there, like how did they get there? It's just like it's so strange. Like I can't help but see that and think of Grand Budapest Hotel. um the Wes Anderson uses a variety of aspect ratios in this movie to kind of differentiate time periods, which is a filmmaking tactic that he's continued to use in his more recent films. Also, lots of miniatures used in the exteriors. This is a technique borrowed from silent film era. Very effective, I think, in sort of like defining his style at this stage in his career. It's yeah he's one of the few directors to like really still be shooting in that way, I think. He does a very nice job of it.
For sure. And to your point about this being like one of those kind of like seminal moments for him, he's gone on since this movie to use aspect ratio in different ways
Mm-hmm.
in multiple films as well. In this one, it's particularly like, I guess I wouldn't say effective. I don't know if it's a little, sometimes can be confusing at first, but it is very purposeful, I should say, because this is what he uses also, not just to define the different time periods, but the Russian nesting doll aspect
Yep.
of it all. And yeah, it requires multiple viewings to really understand the frame within the frame within the frame, which
Mm-hmm.
he's used in other films like I think Asteroid City most notably.
Yep.
But yeah, this is where that all began for him.
Yep, for sure. Another just important note is, as we talked about the big ensemble cast, and there were many actors who took small roles in this movie because of their affinity for Wes Anderson. They reportedly worked for minimal pay, as a favor. For a favor to him. I named a handful of actors in the movie. There's so many more who have like such small roles and little walk-on parts. Do you have a favorite cameo or small role in the
Um,
movie, Kyle?
in terms of the small role, I mean, Jason Schwartzman's little like momentary
The modern day
concierge,
concierge,
yeah, is pretty freaking funny. Like he's funny, but Willem Dafoe's like hitman
Yep.
like character, maybe not a small role, but a minor role, but like pretty hysterical and just his whole attitude.
Yeah. I love the reveal of the Society of Cross Keys
I mean,
concierges.
the greatest
certainly
hits.
Bill Murray,
Sure.
fantastic. Fisher Stevens is a personal favorite. That's really funny. How many days do you think Bill Murray was on set? Like probably like 2, maybe.
Max.
Yeah.
And he probably still golfed both those days too.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's fun to see people kind of like, pop up, in a movie like this. It really does have a huge cast. Another, small role, pivotal role is Edward Norton in this movie. He's very effective as sort of like a conflicted, I mean, I guess he's sort of playing like a effectively like a German soldier,
Yeah,
like
like an
the
SS
equivalent.
officer or something.
Yeah, and usually I think sort of like the idea of like the good Nazi is like not like super appealing in a movie. But there's a character who kind of emerges as like a worse figure, a more villainous figure later, and I think that kind of like helps shade Norton's character in a more sympathetic light. But he's very good as well. They're all really in support though of Ray Fiennes as Gustav, the concierge. Really just incredible character. Ray Fiennes is fantastic in the role. I think this is a character that's really kind of like caught between generations, and that's sort of like a theme of the movie, is being sort of like outside of your own time. What are your thoughts on Ray Fiennes?
Yeah, well, first things first, I will mention that I didn't like when we did our Oscar podcast a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I literally found out after we did that podcast that his name is not Ray, it's Rafe. And it's so I was like mispronouncing it, I think, in that podcast, but of course since have learned that he pronounces his name Rafe, and it's Rafe Fiennes, and no one ever says both F's. But this is my favorite role of his, and I think he's an incredible actor. But this is my favorite role, and the character of Monsieur Gustave is like incredible. Like he's villainous in his own way. He's also extremely, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Tedious to be around, but like you love him instantly, and he's plays a father figure. And he also plays a bit of a con man. Even he's an incredible.
He's a womanizer. He's he's like both like simultaneously like not a good person and also like one of the most charming people like you'll meet in a movie, and like he like does redeem himself. I think if he needs to be redeemed, like sure. Yeah. I mean, I just like wrote down a couple of my favorite quotes from him. I think this is like, if you don't mind me, I love, course. Obviously there's like, take your hands off my lobby boy. Yeah. Which is a great one. But I also love like, I don't know what kind of cream they put on you when you're down in the morgue, but I want some. Yeah. It's really like good. When he's speaking to Tilda Swinton's character's corpse. But like just the lines that he delivers in this and the way in which he does it are all-timers. Like this is one of the great characters of cinema, in my opinion. I think so too. It's certainly a one of his great roles for sure, and I think he's a wonderful actor who's been in a lot of really excellent movies. Has never won an Academy Award. He probably should have won an Academy Award for this performance. I think we'll probably look back. It's been about 10 years. We'll probably look back in another 10 years and think like, this was the one, one of the great crimes of the Academy Awards. But he's fantastic. I was wondering, do you think this is like the best performance in a Wes Anderson movie? And if not, like, what is there a better one that you can name? Oh, I don't know. There's some big ones, man, because Royal Tenenbaum is a big role too. That's a big performance. Well, who in Royal Tenenbaums? I'm curious. I mean, Royal himself. Okay, yeah, Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman's character of Royal Tenenbaum is like right up there. That's a hard one for me. I don't know if it's his best, but it's top 3. Yeah, I think that. I mean, other contenders probably Bill Murray in Life Aquatic is is up there. Bill Murray also in Rushmore too. Yeah. Yep. I think this is probably my favorite performance in a Wes Anderson movie. It's just so entertaining to watch him kind of like spit out these one lines. So like the dialogue is so good, just like the rapid fire snappy, kind of like it's almost like I think it probably I think Wes Anderson would probably admit it's like 1940s inspired by those sort of like rapid fire comedies. It's just it's so good. He says darling better than anyone on the planet. Yes. And also like the way other characters talk about him is important too, particularly the narrator, who like the line that sticks out to me is when he describes him as the most perfumed man you'd ever meet. Like that's very funny because there's like a sight gag like at that moment later where he steps off an elevator and then like you go back into the interior of the elevator and they're like looking around like, what is that smell? But like it also tells you so much about him. You just in that like one line you can sort of like figure out so much about this guy. What's the perfume called again? The panache or something like that? Yeah. And he's always asking for it. Yeah. What do you think it smelled like? I don't know. That's where smell-o-vision like cinema 5D or whatever really would come in handy. Yeah, I just imagine it like it contributes to like this gross aspect of him. You just imagine him as being I don't know, just kind of this like sort of like lecherous, like unpleasant person in some respects, but yeah, I don't know, just a great sort of a really well designed, well conceived character in Gustav for sure.
Who writes poetry and recites it to
Yes,
his
yes.
employees. Love it.
Um, let's talk about some of our favorite scenes from Grand Budapest Hotel. I identified a handful here, but I'm curious to hear yours as well. The first one that really comes to mind for me is the reading of the will. After Tilda Swinton's character has died, Gustav and Zero head to her estate and find themselves in a room where Jeff Goldblum is reading the will, and we're introduced to Adrian Brody's absolutely kind of like insane like villain character, and just a really great scene. I think Goldblum is great in that scene. Adrian Brody and Ray Fiennes have some great sort of like dialogue together. It's really good.
Yeah, no, I love that one. I like how some of the villainous characters don't have accents at all. They just are able to speak in their like American accent, and it just allows them to cook.
Yeah,
And there's people cooking in that scene for sure.
yeah, it's really good. Another one that I highlighted is the prison escape scene, which so I have maybe it's a hot take. I kind of think most of the prison section is that's kind of like where the movie slows down
True.
for me
Yes.
a little bit.
Yeah.
But the actual like scene where they escape, that sequence is really, really good. And like to me, that feels like an homage to silent film in a lot of ways, particularly in the way that the score is used. It's kind of like that's like the MVP moment for the score, in my mind. I think Harvey Keitel is great in that scene. And it leads to, I think, kind of like probably what I think is the most important scene in the movie, where Gustav and Zero have a conversation after Gustav has escaped and Zero's come to pick him up, and where Zero reveals his personal history and that he's really a refugee and not an immigrant, which is how they've been kind of referring to him throughout the film. And that's sort of like a point where the movie's themes kind of begin to reveal themselves a little bit.
Yeah, themes that are very important to our day and age right now too, which again,
yes, course,
another reason worth talking about this movie. Speaking of Gustav and Zero, I like where they first meet. That whole sequence of him meeting Zero for the first time and kind of interviewing him and interrogating him as they're walking through the hotel, and they're talking to all the different types of other employees along the way, and he's interacting with certain guests. It's towards the beginning of the movie, but it is an awesome scene of exposition that doesn't feel like exposition at all. You're getting so much information about how the Grand Budapest Hotel works while you're getting character information about who Monsieur Gustav is and how he kind of carries himself, as well as you're learning about Zero all at the same time. I mean, that's the type of exposition that is like masterclass in my opinion, and that whole sequence is like super rewatchable for me as well.
And it teaches you what a lobby boy is. Yeah, you start to, because like I didn't know what a lobby boy was when before I saw this movie. And I don't know, maybe that's a Wes Anderson invention. It very well could be. But it speaks to like the specificity of his filmmaking and his writing. That we get all that information, and it's really, really well done. I think that like in general, Ray Fiennes and Tony Revolori have like really good chemistry together throughout the film. You really do believe them, as they call themselves brothers, during the movie, but it's really also very much sort of like a father-son dynamic in a lot of ways. And I think that like their scenes together, which is much of the movie, I think work incredibly well.
Yeah.
Together.
And it goes to, there's all these kind of like Hollywood elite that are in Wes Anderson movies time and time again, but he also is a master at discovering like amazing actors at young ages, whether it's Jason Schwartzman or, whether it's in his latest film,
Kate Winslet's daughter.
And she seems like an all-time pro, and this is her first full-length feature. And of course, Tony Revolori in this movie is delightful, and he went on to create a lot of different roles in movies. So Wes is definitely a guy who can like find incredible new talent. I mean, Moonrise Kingdom, for example, too. Yeah.
Yep. Another scene that I highlighted here is the ski chase scene,
Fun, super
which
fun.
is it's a lot of fun. Again, kind of like has silent movie vibes, really showing off the, like all of Wes Anderson's sort of like the technical and craft focused filmmaking. There's like the use of miniatures here. It's just like it's very evocative. It's an action scene kind of unlike any other that I've seen in a Wes Anderson movie or any movie. It's very, very good. And then like the whole like the closing sequence where we get sort of like all three of our kind of like narrative timelines are wrapped up in sort of like rapid succession. We get Gustav and Agatha and Zero back on the train in black and white, and this is sort of like the end of Gustav's story. And then F. Murray Abraham as the elderly Zero discussing that moment with Jude Law's narrator character back in the hotel. And then finally closing with that girl who we meet in the very first scene, reading the narrator's book in the cemetery in Lutz, which is a very important location in the movie. And, like this, like, I wonder if maybe we can talk a little bit about like why is this so emotionally impactful? Because like every time I see this, like it really like this does affect me emotionally, and it's kind of like almost like black magic, like how it's done. I think it's like the rapid succession of like the way things end. Like this movie's only an hour and 40 minutes long or something like that, and like it's packed so much into a relatively short time frame, including this like the high drama of the end, which kind of coincides with the start of what we're like made to think is World War II. And I don't know, like I'm always like very very moved by the ending in this movie and the way he kind of like pulls it all together.
Yeah, pulls it all together by pulling out. You see like this teeny tiny little story within a story within a story within a story. Music is also on point, like really good at that part of the movie. It's like it's just really kind of a crescendo, and I think it just kind of helps us feel the little stories and humanity behind big world events. It's like it's a really cool like cinematic technique to do that, and he just pulls it off in this movie like in spades.
Yeah, we see like the progression in time from like when the hotel was like at its best to sort of like when it was more run down to this contemporary time where it's a like a distant memory for all but a small handful of people, and it just kind of like I don't know, there's something like really profound about that, and to me I think this is probably like the best example of Wes Anderson's, as you put it, like Russian doll style of storytelling. I'm wondering if you agree with that. Also, I another thing that makes it like the best example for me is like the movie really, one of the themes is storytelling, and like continuing to tell these stories like through generations is like very important idea that's relayed in those final moments in the film.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm the hugest fan of the story within a story within a story from just in general, because I think it really takes like a master craftsman to pull it off. And even with a master craftsman, it can be touch and go in some cases. So like I would prefer most people out there just tell us a simple story. But like the complexity of this is part of what makes it charming and alluring and really rewatchable, because you want to kind of like go back and be like, okay, so how many layers deep are we in this storytelling like structure? So I love that he does this. I just don't think it's something many people should attempt. I think it's extremely complex to thread the needle.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. It's very hard to do. I think, if I'm being honest, I think sometimes Anderson has a hard time doing it. That was one of my, that's one of my, complaints with, or critiques rather, of Asteroid City. I just thought it was, I can see what he's going for there. It was just like so labyrinthine and like difficult to track. Even for him, it was, it was challenging in the moment to kind of like grasp that. This is more simple in comparison. And also I think something that, that helps this movie along is it's like, it's fundamental to the themes of the film. Not that it isn't an Asteroid City. It certainly is, but like, it's just, it's very, it's like, it's right there, in the text, the importance of like different kinds of storytelling through
It's more
generations.
bookended in this movie where you kind of enter it in the beginning and exit it at the end. In Asteroid City, you're jumping in and out and up layers and down layers multiple
Yeah.
times throughout the film. So it is far more complex. And again, hard to thread that needle, but ambitious to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. Were there any other scenes that you wanted to call attention to that I didn't?
There is, but
listen
I'm
to?
going to save it for my closing thoughts.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I thought we could talk about is the just sort of like where this movie sort of sits in Anderson's filmography. Um, I think, as I mentioned before, I think it's fair to say it's probably his most critically acclaimed movie.
No doubt.
Certainly got the most Academy Awards attention. I think,
he won for something else.
He did. Yeah, he won for his short films. Was it last year? The most recent Academy Awards that he won. Yeah,
correct.
Well deserved. I think the short films are really good. And it's cool that he has an Academy Award. He certainly deserves one. Just kind of odd that he came for those
for a Netflix show. Yeah.
I think I know the answer to this one. It's is it your favorite? Even though it's the most critically acclaimed, where does it sit for you personally in his?
Yeah, it's again, like I think I've mentioned this to you in the past. Like I think Wes Anderson on his worst day is still making an incredible movie worth watching and worth rewatching. So like I've made my list of like my top Wes Anderson movies from top to bottom across his entire filmography, and I don't think this is in my top 5. I think it's in my top 10. But again, the amount of position moving between those is so minute. Like it's I like so many of them. So it's like it's hard for me to. It's not my favorite, but it's like it's not might even not be my top 5. But the distance from like number 6 to number 1 is minuscule in how good of and how much I love it and how much stuff I have. I'm looking at not only my Grand Budapest book, but I have a Grand Budapest notebook on my desk right now too. So obviously I love this movie. I have a poster of it in my TV room,
Yeah. I think for me, it is like near the top. Like for me, it's like definitely like top tier Wes Anderson. My favorites tend to be like I mentioned earlier, the earlier films I tend to rank higher than the more recent films. Like I think probably my favorite, push comes to shove, is always going to be Royal Tenenbaums. Rushmore is like kind of right in that, like, either number 2 or like 1B position. And then, I love Life Aquatic and Darjeeling and Bottle Rocket, probably about equally. And then like the newer stuff, I find it harder to connect to a little bit because of that like shift in style. But I think that like Grand Budapest, like we talked about, is right on that dividing line where it's a little from column A, a little from column B. He hasn't like fully, dove into that like diorama style yet.
It's flirting with it, though.
Flirting with it, yeah. And there's still a little bit of that sort of like the openness of movies like Darjeeling and Life Aquatic and Royal Tenenbaums
where he's on boats, he's on trains, like physically the whole time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think for that reason, it's like it's a pretty important movie, like in his filmography. And I wonder, like what, if there's a movie that will come that will signify like another stage of his filmography, or if maybe it's already happened. It's just like I kind of wonder like what the future holds for him. Like we mentioned earlier, he's he seems to be making moves at a pretty rapid clip with people he feels comfortable with. We could get like a Phoenician Scheme type movie or an Asteroid City type movie like every 2 years, for quite some time. Wes Anderson's still a young man, so there's something appealing about that. I just wonder, like how does the style evolve? Because it seems like there was a lot of evolution kind of like right up until this movie, and then things kind of like settled a bit.
Yeah, I think that I hope that he continues to do both. I hope he continues to make really highly constructed little like boxed in movies that feel special and whimsical. But I also hope that he will continue to make big, sprawling, interesting movies on location where he's finding unique spots around the world and shooting on location. I hope we get both, because I like both. I think they're different energies and I can enjoy both of them. So I hope we get more of each.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I think like the key thing is that like he's got a system in place to do what he wants. And I think that like, regardless of what how you feel about the more recent stuff versus the early stuff, like he's a auteur with a real point of view. And, it's like Hollywood is littered with a history of auteurs who like didn't get a chance to make the movies they wanted to make. And like, he has a chance to make the movies he wants to make seemingly, which is, I think, a good thing. So, you have on this outline that we made, Kyle, a bullet point called the Michael Cera effect. I'm curious if is this the time for the Michael Cera effect conversation?
Yeah, this is my hot take. So, right. When Michael Cera was announced as a member of the cast for the Phoenician Scheme, I think a lot of people were like, wait a second, how is this the first time? He was announced as him finally being part of a Wes Anderson film. And I think people were like, wait a second, of course he was in one before. And people were like trying to figure out, wait, which one he was in? I swear he was in one. I think personally, after rewatching this yesterday, rewatching the Grand Budapest Hotel for yesterday, I think that they were channeling in their brain a lot of Tony Revolori's like vibes from Grand Budapest Hotel. He has so many Michael Cera-esque facial expressions through the course of this movie. He's 100% like in the Michael Cera space with his character portrayal in this. And I didn't figure that out until yesterday, is that's where a lot of people were probably thinking that they may have seen Michael Cera in a Wes Anderson movie before, because he was just playing so in the Michael Cera sweet spot with the character of Zero. So that's my hot take.
I think that's a good take. I think that, you can definitely see some of that, some of those Michael Cera isms, in Tony Revolori's character for sure. I'm a little dubious to the whole narrative of finally like Michael Cera in a Wes Anderson movie, because I actually I think he's fine in the Phoenician Scheme, but he's just doing like the Michael Cera stick. He always does.
I will disagree with you, sir. He's a revelation in the Phoenician Scheme, and I loved his character. And I won't do any sort of spoilers, but there's a great moment with him that I just cannot wait to see again in the theater.
I think I know the moment you're talking about, and I don't disagree. It's I don't know. I'll say Michael Cera's never been one of my he's not one of my guys. He's not one of my
all right. Well, when he walks past Worn and Wound again, we won't invite you to come meet him.
That's fine. Listen, I think it'd be great for engagement and for clicks if he was in the shop, buying a strap. But right. And I wish Michael Cera well and all of his fans well.
Thank you. I will take your well wishes.
To close this out, I think, something we like to do on this podcast is think about movies that pair well with the movie, under discussion, either another, movie by the same filmmaker or a movie in a similar vein, that's maybe thematically linked somehow by another filmmaker. Do you have any recommendations for double features or just, movies to kind of consider with Grand Budapest Hotel?
Yeah. So, and this goes to one of my other favorite scenes in the film. So there's a great video on YouTube by a YouTuber by the name of Thomas Flight, who kind of discovered this scene. There's the sequence when Willem Dafoe's character is kind of pursuing Jeff Goldblum's character, and apparently, unbeknownst to me, but that whole sequence is a shot-for-shot remake of a sequence in Alfred Hitchcock's Torn Curtain, and it's beat for beat identical. In the way that it's carried out. And it's just amazing to see the two in a side-by-side comparison. So I'm picking Torn Curtain by Alfred Hitchcock as my companion movie with this one. And I think, I look for that sequence in both.
That's so I wasn't aware of the similarities in that sequence. I have seen Torn Curtain, but I never made that connection. And, I've often thought of Hitchcock as sort of a comparison to Wes Anderson, because, we've talked about this. I think that the critique that Wes Anderson is just doing a parody of himself over and over again is lazy, because you would never you wouldn't say that about Alfred Hitchcock, but right, you could, because he's you could say you could cynically say he just keeps making the same man accused of crime he didn't commit, suspense ensues like every time. But he uses that format to like explore all sorts of themes about,
Sure.
relationships and,
politics,
life in America. Yeah, exactly. Like there's so much subtext there to that. And so I sometimes think when I hear like that criticism about Wes Anderson, like it's okay that like they do, like he does something similar every time out. Cause there's just a lot you can do with that if you're a talented writer and filmmaker. So that's a really good comp. I'm going to have to rewatch Torn Curtain and watch for that.
What's your companionship movie with this one?
So the movie that I thought of, and I think I've thought of these movies as sort of a pair for a while now, is Inglourious Bastards by Quentin Tarantino, because they're both these kinds of like, like fantastical reinterpretations of World War II. Obviously like very different time periods. The Grand Budapest Hotel takes place in, I think, 1932 or 1933, which is like, right when the Nazis are coming to power, essentially. And it's this story of like creeping fascism and, and like everything's changed, like you don't, like the names of the countries are made up and the uniforms are different, but like it's very clear like we're talking about like Nazis, in this movie. And of course, Inglourious Bastards is, very famously, spoiler, I guess, for Inglourious Bastards, has an ending that is like a fantasy ending to like the World War II conflict. And for that reason, I've just kind of like always thought of these movies as sort of paired. And they're also both, made by, significant auteurs of the same generation coming out of the same movement in American independent film. And I just think it's kind of interesting to kind of like view them together to see these sorts of like artistic representations of a very specific time. It's a different way to do a period piece. They're both really entertaining, for very different reasons. They're both, I think, quite moving, for very different reasons. So, so Inglourious Bastards is my double feature.
Love it. It's one of my faves. So that's a good set. I will also just mention that, for those who like physical media, the Criterion Collection is coming out with like a big box, like 4K box set of like all of Wes Anderson's movies, full-length feature movies, I should say, up to I think French Dispatch or Asteroid City.
I think Asteroid City's in the collection. I could be wrong. We'll double check. We'll leave a link to it in the show notes. Yeah, that'll be a cool. That'll be a cool release. Criterion's done a great job of putting these movies out in really beautiful editions for years, like since Rushmore. Like
I have the Criterion Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums and Life Aquatic.
Yeah, no, they're great. That's a good rec. But like I said, we'll leave a link to that in the show notes. Kyle, any final words on Grand Budapest Hotel?
If you haven't seen it, watch it. If you've only seen it once, watch it again.
Yeah. Well said. Kyle, thank you as always for joining me on Time on Screen. It's fantastic to talk to you about this movie and about Wes Anderson as always. You're such a big fan of Wes Anderson and like your enthusiasm is infectious. So it's really nice to chat with you about one of his movies and really his entire filmography and work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening. We're glad to have you back on Time on Screen, and we'll be back soon. We have a few new episodes planned for the coming weeks and months. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you again soon. Until then, take care.